Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we discuss day-to-day problems people face in their lives. Let's start with the video. My sister and I were never really tight or overly close. Our relationship has always been surface level due to the difference in the way our parents raised us and, as a result, the persons we grew up to be. Also, the lack of our bonding could be considered a result of her mental instability. She has a few mental illnesses that she's constantly medicated for to begin with. Nevertheless, the cycle of her yearning for sisterhood with me, then pushing me away and lashing out at me never really left room for us to get close. As we matured and progressed in our individual journeys through life, our interactions became a lot more calm and transactional. I mean, we mostly bonded over the need for each other's help, advice, or favors. It did not take away from the value of our relationship, or at least that's what I always think about our interactions. I thought that their transactional nature would only mean that we would always be there for each other no matter the circumstances, but I was clearly mistaken. A couple months ago, my sister and her husband invited me over for dinner over the weekend. Though I found it out of place and unusual, I didn't mind this welcomed change and some good old time with my sister's happy little family. If only I'd known what I know now, I wouldn't have stepped foot in their home that day. We had dinner and talked over family gossip and affairs before the conversation took a serious tone of speech. My sister frantically interrupted herself mid-sentence to ask me to be the biological mother of her child and conceive a baby for her. Obviously, when she first blurted out the words, I was taken aback and silenced immediately. She rambled on and on about her reasoning behind requesting such a thing from me. Her medications and drug prescriptions won't allow the baby to be born healthy if he doesn't die in conception anyways. The baby's life or health was a risk she wasn't willing to take, and she couldn't trust another soul with the safety of her baby, let alone the tremendous task of bringing it to life. I knew that many drugs caused women to lose the ability to have children. Still, their psychiatrists usually cut off the drugs and monitored patients over the 9 months of their pregnancy. I rushed my shocked self home that day without giving my sister and her husband any sort of answer. I gave it a bit too much thought, in my opinion, as I'm kind of the person that would usually just say no to large requests. There were so many things that were just off with the whole thing. So many questions and thoughts kept me up that night. How would I get pregnant with my sister's baby? Will the impregnation process harm and influence my general obstetrical health? Even if the impregnation process didn't cause any irreversible damage, the pregnancy and the delivery surely would. My body would never be able to be the same, and my health was already weak enough to begin with. What would my family think of such a decision, and would they be opposed to it? What role would I play in the child's life, and how would the biological mother of my future niece-nephew influence my relationship with him or her? What bothered my psyche the most that day was the fact that I was actually sitting alone in my apartment, unable to sleep, unable to stop thinking, and mentally struggling to actually answer all the questions that roamed my mind. I was actually considering it. I went to work the following day, and by the end of it, I realized that the matter was taking up too much of my thinking space, and I needed to get my answer with a definitive answer. I visited her once again the following day and informed her and her husband that there was no way I would be able to conceive the child. I expressed my concerns about my and the future child's relationship. I was certainly incapable of taking in such a great responsibility, and the whole thing just didn't sit right with me. I talked to my mother the following day as she had spoken to my sister and been informed of the situation. Luckily, my mother and I have the same mentality and thought process. Only my mother seemed to disapprove of my decision. She tried talking me into it by resolving all the concerns I expressed and coming up with a counter-argument to each of my questions, and I realized that I was slowly slipping into the fantasy of making someone else's life, my own sister's, complete. I was bringing in a new person into the world, and I'm to make sure he or she would have the best aunt in the history of mankind, not biological mother or birth giver, but the aunt whose only role was limited to being cool and leading the offspring away from crimes while keeping life fun and risky. I was drowning in fantasies and hopes in the idea that this was certainly going to repair my relationship with my sister and make it the strongest it could be. You'd think the story ends wonderfully. You'd think I'd informed my sister with my approval, held and nurtured her child within me for 9 months, and then got to live the rest of my life content with decision whilst building the most magical relationship with my nephew. No, the events that took place shook my life and flipped everything upside down. As the months were progressing and pregnancy became undisguisable on me, I could notice that my sister and her husband's attitude towards me was changing ever so slightly from excited and welcoming to a mix of horrible, unpleasant emotions. My sister became hateful of me and spiteful of my body changing. She was constantly commenting on the way I was growing and made sure to insult me in front of her husband each and every single time we were in the same room. The couple started to retract the process slowly but surely as they stopped showing up to the doctor's appointments and accompanying me to buy the baby's clothes and necessities. I was aware of every change in behavior and demeanor, but I pushed through, hoping that it was all in my head and things would change once the baby came along. Well, sadly, I can safely say that things certainly didn't change for the better. They did, however, change for the worse as my sister and her husband refused to join me during labor, refused to pick up calls, and lost complete contact with the family and me. I've given birth to the child now, and my sister and her husband are nowhere to be found or reached. I'm not gonna lie, I'm infused with panic and freaked out about what this sudden abandonment could mean. Update. It's been 2 months since I went into labor and brought the most beautiful baby boy into the world. I was faced with the challenge of naming the baby boy and thought I felt the world's worth of love for him. I didn't feel motherly towards him in any way. I knew that parenthood wasn't the thing for me, and it was never something I wanted to embark on. So when his parents' behavior of abandonment became evident to me and everyone around me, I was in pure panic mode. After their 2-month self-granted vacations were over, they showed up to my apartment in a van loaded with all the toys and equipment we had shopped for over the months. The clothes, the furniture, the products, and the safety equipment were all loaded off at my apartment as my sister and I stood outside arguing, shouting profanities at one another. We argued about the fact that she no longer wanted to be a mother to a child she did not birth and started pinning the blame on me for going along with the plan in the first place, claiming that I took advantage of her ill state of being to fund fulfilling my motherhood fantasy at the expense of her credit card and her husband's sperm bank. I was truly disgusted by everything she was saying as none of it was true. Motherhood has never been a thing for me. I explained that I did it out of empathy for her and her husband and an intense desire to make them happy. Still, no matter what I said, it seemed to pass right through her, like she was determined to pin it on me and rid herself of the newborn. I tried begging or asking nicely or forcing the couple to take their child and care for it, as I had neither the means nor the stability necessary to raise a child. Still, they had already made up their minds and didn't come to discuss it with me. They informed me of their decision, dropped off the stuff, and then drove off as if nothing had happened. I tried talking to other family members, such as my mom and grandparents, to help get the baby back to his parents. But everyone seemed to side with my sick sister and her twisted husband. Somehow, I'm viewed as the bad guy in the story, who should have never complied with a sick woman's desperate wishes, and I'm the one who took advantage of the situation. Even my mother, who helped talk me into this, sided with my sister against me and gradually stopped talking to me as often as she used to until we stopped talking to each other at all. My interactions with my family started decreasing gradually until I realized that I was left to mother this child on my own, a child that I had never asked for nor got the time to mentally prepare for. I was unprepared in every single way possible, and to top it all off, I was left alone and unsupported. So that makes me and this baby boy the only family we have, as everyone else seemed to give up on us and contact seemed to fade away. I'm not sure if I'll ever develop feelings of motherhood towards the baby, but I know for sure that I will treat him like the best aunt anyone could ever ask for. I don't know slack about parenting, nor did I sign up to learn, but I'll do the best humanly possible for my and my poor baby's sake and happiness. Next story. My wife is a stay-at-home mom. She manages everything at home, and I'm truly grateful for everything that she does for the home and our family. I try to give her as much breaks as possible by doing the childcare after coming home. Sharing chores, she has days off, she can take sick leaves every weekend, I do all the childcare, etc. Today, she told me she feels unappreciated and that her work around the house is not considered a full-time job. I reassured her that it definitely is a full-time job according to me, and I'm grateful for everything that she's doing around the house. However, she was not convinced and said that she should get a salary just like I do at my work. Me. Who owes you the salary? She. You, of course, because you're technically my employer. Me. Okay, so after I give you a salary, where will the money go since we both have pooled finances? She. Our joint account? Me. Yeah, exactly. So what is even the point of me giving you a salary if it's going to be in the same joint account anyways and you still have full access to the joint account money? All income is family money, so it makes no sense for you to get a salary if it's going to belong to the entire family anyway. She huffed and went back into the room, seeing that my thinking is flawed. Am I the a-hole? Edit. We have kids aged 3, 5, 7, 7. Not the a-hole, but maybe she feels guilty spending money from the joint family account on herself, so she would like some money of her own that she doesn't have to feel guilty about spending. Maybe she should get a separate account of her own. Did she say if she wanted this? Maybe she feels like the money you make isn't as much hers. You need to talk to her more about what you two can do to ensure she feels like everything is fair. No a-holes here. I read the post as her broaching the subject of returning to the workforce. I think you need to hire a babysitter so you and your wife can go out and have a nice dinner and discuss the true reason for her statement. If not return to the workforce, she may simply want an individual account that she can have some autonomy over. Fully understandable. Have the discussion where you ask her what she really wants from her statement, and then sit there and listen to what she says to understand her. Ask questions that lead to understanding, not trying to trap her in circle logic. My wife had the same discussion with me. She's also a stay-at-home mom, and we have 3 kids. It came down to her wanting to be able to have cash on hand to do whatever she wants instead of worrying about a joint account and how her spending money from it can impact family decisions. Even though all the money is our money, she saw the joint account as family money that she didn't want to take from directly. So every payday, I have to set it to auto-transfer a sum from the family account to her individual account, and that fixed her issue. Even though it's literally the same money, it's completely different for her in another account. No a-holes here. It sounds like what your wife actually wants is a job, her career back, but maybe hasn't come to full circle on that thought or feels like she can't. What were her career aspirations before kids? If being an equal financial contributor is important to her life, I know there are a lot of ways to contribute to family, but I very specifically mean financial contribution here. I can see why this would be important to her, even if it doesn't make sense on the outset. If the money is going to the same place regardless, but it makes your wife feel important, and based on her feelings, I'd wager a good amount that it does, then why not? What does it actually hurt versus what does it achieve? That said, I see your positioning because it doesn't make sense, but I think if you dig a little deeper, it might be clearer. Next story. I, male 34, have a 17-year-old daughter from my first relationship. Her mom and I haven't been together since our daughter was born, but are still good friends and have co-parented well. I've always had my daughter twice a week and every other weekend. My daughter's bedroom window is connected onto our roof, which is a flat, so her and her friends have occasionally gone out there with blankets and food and sat and chatted. It's not particularly high up, so it wasn't hugely unsafe, but I always urge her not to do it. The window is about 2 feet above the roof, so it's hard getting back in if you're short or by yourself. On Saturday, I was out when I got a call from my daughter telling me she got stuck on the roof and I needed to come home immediately to come and help her. I told her that I'd be home soon, but she'd gotten out there herself when I've told her a million times not to, so she can figure out how to get back in herself. I got back 2 hours later and my daughter had called her mom, who was absolutely furious. We live in Saskatchewan, so it was cold, but our daughter was fine, and I told her mom that if our daughter had listened to me about not going out there, it wouldn't have happened. Our daughter is fine, and I wasn't gone that long, but her mom and even my girlfriend are saying that I put my need to prove a point above my daughter's well-being. Am I the a-hole? Edit. The window is probably closer to around 4 feet from the roof. Typed this out quickly and didn't think it would matter hugely to the post. My daughter is 5 feet and can't get back in the window without standing on something. LOL. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at the expense of your daughter. When I was 16, I used to do the same thing at my parents' house. They always told me to stop. So I got stuck and they were home. Instead of helping me right away, they went outside and took pictures of me stuck on the roof. There is still a framed photo of me on the roof that my mom has on her desk. Lol. And not the a-hole. She wasn't in any danger. You came home and helped her. If she was in danger, she could have called friends, neighbor, and or the fire department. Presumably, you explained the reasons why you didn't want her to go out there by herself. It's a perfectly reasonable request to ask her not to go out there by herself. Many parents wouldn't let their child out on a roof at all. Your daughter chose to disregard that very reasonable rule and suffered the consequences. I don't agree with the comment saying that you risked your daughter's well-being to prove a point. Your daughter clearly had access to a phone and was capable of calling both yourself and her mother. If she was in any real danger, then she or her mother could have called the emergency services. But it seems like all she had was a little discomfort that will make for a good lesson to be more careful in the future, not the a-hole. We've had many conversations about it, and she's promised many times not to go out there alone. I also have no idea why she'd even want to, considering the Wi-Fi signal doesn't pick up out there. Next story. Will I be the a-hole if I told my stepsister she is no longer allowed to be left alone with my daughter? My stepsister was thrilled when she found out I was having a baby, and when my daughter was born, she was in love with her, always wanting to be around her, take care of her, hold her. All of which I don't mind to start off with because that is any normal person's reaction, and we're both so close. When my daughter was around 9 months, I was letting my stepsister look after her while I worked, shopped, and just did the little things I would do before I gave birth. I fully trusted her until I returned to find out she wasn't home, yet my daughter was. I was shocked to say the least, and when my stepsister came home, I lashed out. She'd been gone for half an hour, and luckily my daughter was left unharmed, but she could crawl now, and plug sockets were left turned on. Chairs weren't tucked under, and she could have gotten hurt in any way. I'm thinking about telling my sister she can't take off my daughter at her house alone anymore. Is this the right choice? Edit. My sister is 24. Holy cow. Not the a-hole, but let me be crystal clear. You would be a huge a-hole if you didn't absolutely prohibit your stepsister from being alone with your daughter. Do you know how easy it is for an unsupervised baby to get hurt or killed in a matter of seconds? You need to protect your daughter, and your stepsister leaving the house while the baby is alone is completely unacceptable. I'm concerned that this is even a question in your mind. Not the a-hole. You don't say how old the stepsister is, but in most jurisdictions, abandoning a child is actually a crime. Even if it was somehow legal where you are, it is completely unsafe and demonstrates very poor judgment and should not be tolerated. I suggest you make sure there is a second trusted adult present, or she can't sit with your child. Not the a-hole. Your stepsister should not be allowed any unsupervised time with your daughter, period. She showed an astounding lack of good judgment and proved that she can't be trusted to care for your daughter at all. She left an infant that was in her care alone in a house. After something like that, the ban on caring for a child is permanent. But I wouldn't phrase it as she's no longer allowed, forbidden. Just make alternative arrangements and say you were disappointed with what happened on why and want to make sure it doesn't happen again, and thus you're hiring a babysitter, leaving her with grandparents, whatever alternative arrangements you've made.